Apple reported a monster quarter with record revenue and earnings.
And it's all thanks to AirPods? Stay tuned for your daily charge.
Good morning and welcome to the Daily Charge. It's Wednesday, January 29th. I'm Ben Fox-Rubin.
I'm Scott Stein.
And here are today's headlines. The knock on Apple is that it's no longer innovative and its phones have gotten boring. A year ago, the company's stock was slumping and its sales in China were down. Well, guess what? Since then, the stock doubled and people are buying more of those boring, quote unquote, iPhones. Scott, what do you make of all this?
Well, I mean, the iPhone 11 got less expensive compared to the XR. And I think that just became, a little more practical. But I mean, I think it's not just the iPhone. As we know, it's like the AirPods and the watches, and also like the lower cost Apple watches, things like the Series 3. It's all that collected stuff.
So let's start with the iPhone though.
Yeah.
You reviewed the latest iPhone.
I did.
It was a little cheaper. It's like $50 cheaper. It's still $700. So it's not like an impulse buy or anything like that. But from your impressions, did you think it was more polished? Did you think it was a little bit better? Is there something about the phone that you think really incited a lot of people to buy it this time around?
Well, I think battery life. I think that made an impact for people. The idea that battery life would be better and we get over that hump, and when reviews were showing that. I think that camera always matters, but I always think that the changes are pretty incremental, but it seems like this generation around, things like that wide angle, things like the night vision mattered. But I am pretty surprised.
It's kind of surprising to me.
Right, I'm totally surprised.
I was watching
I
was watching that presentation in September when they first revealed it, and it seemed like a snooze to me.
Yeah.
So and granted, this is just one quarter. And a lot can happen over the course of a year, but record revenue and profits, that's exactly what we used to say about Apple, just basically like clockwork. Every single quarter, they just kept doing better and better. And what was it, the iPhone 6 when they came out? They blew the doors off. Like, they absolutely crushed it. So it does kind of feel like they're getting their mojo back. Foreshadowing.
Yeah, probably. Soon more on that to come.
Right.
It is surprising to me too, and I don't really have anything really concrete to say about that because it feels like they're continuing the same path that they're always been doing, which is like the
slow and steady.
Incremental, interesting, sometimes more obvious, sometimes more in the weeds updates each year.
And we're not doing a foldable. We're not doing a foldable.
No
we're not doing 5G.
No 5G stuff.
We've been on this show multiple times saying, hey, this is getting a little stale. This is getting pretty dusty. Apparently, people are pretty comfortable with what their expectation is. If anything, Apple is really good at giving you a product that works, that you know how it is, and maybe not changing it up that much makes sense. Frankly, I am a little surprised, but hey, numbers are the numbers.
It's been a very practical product, but it's also funny because in the last year, iOS 13 had a lot of bugs going on. So, or 12 to 13, I feel like we've had all these little incremental updates. People are talking about things that have been a little wonky about it. So, it's just interesting because then when that all shakes out, you're like, oh yeah, everything seemed to be just fine.
It's okay.
But I do think there's something to be said for the consistency in the product line, because I look at like the 5G stuff, okay, but particularly the foldable stuff, regardless of whether you want to buy one, it's also the price is so high. So I think people are so price sensitive that like you got to get those prices down more. So particularly for an Apple, you don't want a more expensive. I don't want a more expensive iPhone. We want a less expensive. And there's like the talk about whether they'll do the iPhone 9 or the SE2 in the spring to go against like a Pixel 4a or these other more affordable phones. Like that's the direction that needs to happen for Apple. So like, I wouldn't look like up the ramp. I want to look to like,
I totally agree.
Down
Obviously, from a consumer perspective, I totally agree. We have a lot to cover, so let's keep moving. The Mac and the iPad. Revenue is down in both of those lines. So all is not well in Apple world. It's worth mentioning that. So what are your thoughts about that? Do you kind of feel like, the iPad really is still facing challenging times? What do you think that they can do about that?
It was a weird year for that stuff. Well, first of all, like there was no new iPad Pro last year. And the iPads that came out were these iterative like iPad mini and then a newer version of the base iPad. And they still haven't resolved the difference between the iPads and the rest of the Mac line, which Microsoft's done a while ago, exploring Surface and things like that. So we've been waiting for that. Apple's just taking its time with that. You know, some people think that's fine. Other people really think that's not okay. I get really annoyed at all the ways that the iPad is not my full everyday machine.
Yeah.
Not to say that it can't do a lot of other things on a daily basis, but then you have to use it in connection with another device you have lying around.
Yeah.
So,
and you're paying a lot of money for that.
yeah.
So,
like
you know,
at
that is
$300 for an
frustrating.
iPad, okay. But like then, you know, you get into iPad Pro territory where you want that to do everything. So I still feel like that needs to be resolved. And then for the Macs, it's like, you know, the keyboards, like they had something perfect with the Air a long time ago. And now there's just like all these different versions, I feel like. And then people have issues about one or the other. And I've never liked the touch bar. So like, I just feel like it all needs to be kind of redesigned.
Make it familiar.
Right.
Similar to the iPhone.
Put touch in there, get rid of the touch bar.
So
Converge
get
the
to
iPad. Yeah.
So this is the sweet spot specifically for this quarter was wearable and services. And when we talk about services, that includes the App Store, Apple Music, Apple Pay, iCloud. For wearables, it looked like the belle of the ball was very specifically AirPods. I want to call out a Bernstein analyst because Apple doesn't provide this information. A Bernstein analyst predicted AirPods generated about $6 billion in revenue for Apple in 2019, nearly double the 2018 level. I mean, like, are there, you look at wearables a lot. Are there any other wearables that come even close to the AirPods? Why do you think they're so popular? Where did this come from?
I remember wearing them and having an awkward look on my face in 2016. how far things have changed. I mean, well, first of all, they're headphones. So like, it's a very practical market. So there's always an interest in that stuff, but it really spiked and you know, drove it forward. But I think it starts from there because a lot of times you think, well, what am I going to do with blank, or am I going to use it? And like, you'll use headphones, especially if you can slide them in your pocket easily. So I think that already like made them really functional and really interesting.
And they
people.
work. I have AirPods too.
They're super functional.
I was resistant to AirPods for a long time because I had all these other headphones lying around that I got every single time I bought a new Apple phone. And, you know, I eventually just bucked and decided to spend $130 for the original AirPods, and I use them all the time now. It really fits a very basic function. This is the Apple promise is that if you buy the product, you're going to be spending more money on it, but it works. And you don't have to like bother with all sorts of nonsense.
Yeah, it did a really good job of like Bluetooth stuff is annoying, but it doesn't perfect all of it, but it really smooths over a lot of that stuff to make it the least annoying version of that.
Right.
So, and that's what you need to like pick it over plugging something in. Plus like the disappearance of the headphone jack or, you know, like trying to figure out whether you want the lightning or the dongle. And then you just go, I'm going to get the AirPods and it connects to that. And it's sort of like, it's not far off from a really expensive battery case accessory type of thing. It's upwards of that. It's you're on 160 range.
I was surprised at how many AirPods Pro I've seen. People have been buying the Pros, and have you noticed people upgrading to the Pros because that would actually be even more money in Apple's pocket.
I've seen people in the city wearing them. You know, I've seen the Pros, but New York City is its own story.
That's
you
true.
know, but it's like an AirPod city. It's
it
like
really
everywhere.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, what does it mean to see like a New Jersey commuter wearing them? That's a different. That's a subset. But I also think like there's something about the price of that. Like it lines up with the price of what the iPod used to be. Like it's like accessory. I always think like accessory prices. Like what will you buy as an add-on? And the watch has been getting in that zone too. Like Apple Watch getting to $199. That's like the Amazon Echo price. It's like the price.
Not exactly, but I hear what you're saying.
But Echo was like $199.
It gets closer to being a useful add-on, a useful accessory, where it's not super cheap, but for Apple, it is less expensive.
I feel like for me, like 200 or less is the part where I go, like, that's a lot of money, but like, I could maybe spontaneously think about going for something, but more for me, but like getting to more than that gets into like its own device, its own like commitment. So I don't know. I maybe it's something of that. Like they found some zone, because the Apple Watch at like $400 is its own consideration. Like that's a lot of money.
Okay, so
but like you creep down to like $199 or eventually go to less to compete with like Fitbits and others. I feel like that Series 3 is what people are really interested in the watch, like in the bigger
at that
scale.
good sweet spot.
People want to own the other one, but like that's the price you'd want to pay for it.
So broadening out with wearables,
Yeah.
you got a chance to see something that's kind of like a future vision for what wearables could end up being. It's this thing called Mojo Lens. You saw it at CES. This is not Apple specifically, but I want to hear about this too.
But we'll connect the dots because like Tim Cook will continually express interest in AR, like at every opportunity. So, there isn't an event now where like AR is interesting. AR is interesting. AR is on the phone. There's been a lot of talk about Apple exploring glasses or some sort of a tech. So there's a connecting point. But aside from that, this was mind-blowing. I tried out these contact lenses. They're smart contacts, not actually at CES, but at a hotel room separate from it.
At Vegas,
In
right?
Vegas,
Okay.
but not part of CES. And they are a company that has been raising money and exploring making real FDA-approved contact lenses. They're not there yet, but
That are what, AR contact lenses?
yeah. So, and people were hearing the story and saying, like, well, does that mean like virtual reality in your eyes? And no, it's really a display. It's more like a monochrome Google Glass, where you're going to get. There's a micro LED display, and what's crazy is that it's so small that it's like a green pinprick. And I didn't put it in my eye yet, but
very close to
But
your
they're
eye,
testing
right?
it in their eyes. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
I just got to hold it up and look at it, and you could see text appearing. That was like a little heads-up display, giving examples of in a demo loop of things like the weather or what your heart rate would be eventually, things like that. Using it as basically a display. Then I went to a second demo room that had a more prototype where it was still connected to a processor, but showing how the display could be used in connection with. Eventually, they want to put image sensors on to detect things in the dark. So I saw green monochrome outlines making out road signs that they put in the room.
It would give you night vision.
Yeah. So like as I moved around, it matched up
Unreal.
with it and did it. This is a set demo, so but like as somebody walked by in the room, I saw their face in outline, in a green outline on black. But it's crazy. I mean, the possibilities are wild and untested and unproven yet, but they want to build image sensors into this. They want to build a battery into this tiny thing. They want to do, they're going to build motion detecting and the ability to pull up like an interface where you could look around with your eye and pull up information like a pair of smart glasses.
That's so weird.
It's weird. And like, who's that for? But they're pursuing it also as it's FDA is listed as a breakthrough device. So they're working with Palo Alto Vision Center. Sorry, but I'm actually looking up the name of it because I'm trying to remember.
Okay.
But it's I mean, basically they're looking at ways that this can help people who have vision impairment, something like retinitis pigmentosa or macular degeneration.
Right.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Or guys with really bad vision like you and I.
Right. So you could actually have this display information and have it be an assistive device or be used as some sort of weird secret ops night vision thing. Who knows what? But we don't know price on this. We don't know release date. This is years away from being a product that would be released. And they're still in various stages of prototyping and just beginning to explore possibilities with this. But I haven't seen anything that wild in a while. And the idea of it seeing a display that small, it's a micro LED display. And other companies are exploring micro LED too, including Apple. So it's just an interesting demonstration of like how small this stuff can get. But right then it was displaying power wirelessly over air, but they want to eventually have that be a battery and eventually connect with a 5 gigahertz radio to transmit stuff from your phone.
It's pretty crazy. So I want to get to the audience to see what they make of this and plenty else. So we had some business news. We have some cool new conceptual gadgets. What do you folks think about what Apple is expected to come out with in 2020? What do you think of this crazy Mojo Lens display?
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm certainly curious to hear what folks have to say in Periscope, at Twitter, in the chat. Sound off, and BVG. What do we have from the folks out there today?
By the way, Palo Alto's Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. Sorry,
Okay.
I could not.
No
pull that up off
no
the top of
problem.
my head, but I wanted to see if you want to look into that more.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott. Before we get into the chat, shouting out to Jan and all of our friends out in China and the Asia region. It's scary out there right now. Please be safe. Yan did pitch a question right up front, so I want to get to that so he can get back into a comfort zone for himself before the virus comes for everybody. God, it's so frightening.
Yeah, I hope you're okay, dude.
Yeah, seriously, man. How about the service revenue from Apple TV Plus, Arcade, and Magazine? How is Apple doing in those areas?
Right, great question. So Tim Cook did address Apple TV Plus, but only qualitatively, not quantitatively, which you would expect from those guys. I'm going to try to pull up the stat. He basically said something along the lines of, we hit the ground running well, or, our expectations are being met or being surpassed or whatever. But they didn't provide any specific numbers. As far as Magazine and Arcade, I think those were always expected to be smaller businesses. So I don't even know if those got specific call outs. But with Apple TV Plus, it has been interesting to see how they're trying to find a niche in the market, being more... we're not going to have a huge library, but the stuff that we do have, we're going to do Spielberg, we're going to do Oprah, we're going to do high spec stuff. Yeah. And that's what people will pay for is that they want something that's a little bit more curated and a little more focused, as opposed to, Netflix, where you're getting like a fire hose of all kinds of content. So yeah, I mean, basically the long and the short of it is not that much that you can go home with as far as like, how is Apple TV Plus actually doing? They didn't really tell us.
Well, they're like very different propositions too, because it's like the Apple TV Plus, you're grandfathered in a lot of different ways with like purchases, and it's like a very slow trickle of shows, and you're like, oh, it's there, I might as well watch it. Kind of like getting you hooked up. Arcade is more of like the proposition of like paying $5 a month for the games. I feel like there's more of a real viable reason to play that now, but it also feels like a foot in the door for how they may rethink apps down the road, because it is a rebooting of the App Store, and whether that means subscription, a subscription model to apps and services, I don't know, but it's definitely, I think it's the start of something that they're exploring.
My best guess at this point, and an educated guess at that, is that the service revenue is being driven by some of the larger, more mature businesses, and those include obviously the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud. Apple Pay, sure, to a certain extent, but they're basically taking pennies off of the dollar for every transaction. So it is still going to take a while for that to become a more material business. Apple TV Plus, that's kind of the big shiny new object in the services business, but it's $5 a month and it's still really getting started. Just jumping back to the original question, Tim Cook, he said it was off to, quote, a rousing start. So that doesn't mean anything, but I guess he said something nice about it.
Yeah, it's exciting for him. It's an exciting. Who knows what that means? Who knows what that?
We haven't canceled it yet. Basically,
I mean, I'm excited to see the Beastie Boys documentary.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for Time Bandits. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah. Anyway,
wait, Apple's got the exclusive on the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, it's going to be a Spike Jonze live documentary.
Crap, that means they have to get Apple TV now.
Yeah, that's like the first Apple TV project that I've been like, ooh, that's it.
Oh, I thought C was interesting. I think to me what I appreciate about it
to watch. I have like so many shows to watch.
To me, what I like about the idea of Apple TV Plus is that they've at least presented what they are to the market. Is that we're doing like higher tier stuff. When you think about them, they want you to think more Showtime, HBO, like more of a premium tier channel, as opposed to other places like Hulu, Netflix, which give you a little bit of everything. I'm not saying that they don't provide high spec stuff at either of those others. I'm just saying that, Apple TV Plus seems to be very specific and targeted, and you're not going to get as big of a library at all.
Right. And they like, if you buy stuff, you get a 1 year free trial, basically. Is like for people who get that, you just go, okay, I'll just peek at it.
Sure.
I feel like they need to keep expanding that idea, especially as the library is small.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if they're even planning on trying to make money off of it, or if it's a way to just get people to keep buying iPhones. Because that's how Amazon operates with their Prime Video.
Right,
is that they spend like a ton of money, and it encourages people to keep getting Prime.
I'm waiting for that Prime model to hit even more for Apple, like that bigger services. Bubble would be interesting.
Hey, we got a question from right here in the house. Sally, our co-producer on the show, she's got a question.
Hey, Scott. So, you know how you just mentioned that if you buy something, you get the free subscription for Apple. So does that mean that if I'm getting a new phone, do I have to go directly to the Apple store? Or if I go to AT&T and get the new phone, I get it as well?
It should be any way that you buy something. It's on the device itself. You just, like, when you get the device, you you get you hit the thing to you get your year free, but it will renew from what I understand unless you cancel
Of course.
it. So yeah, just
Like
keep an
any
eye out.
magazine
Right, keep an
subscription.
eye out for that. But no, it's not like you don't have to sign up online for anything. It's all like on device where it's
That
just
that
like,
does make sense. Otherwise, they would really irritate their carrier partners.
yes.
But that's a great question, Sally. So yeah,
I believe like when I did it, it was just like, it just knows. It's like you've connected your
just
device, you've
knows.
connected it to your Apple ID, and then it's like, okay, cool. You get your
you for a year.
yeah hook in. But that's a good question.
Really good question. Moving on, more questions. Here, our friend Brian, he says, to my dismay, my BF has been using his sister-in-law's iPhone more. Just got tired of dealing with the Bluetooth and other issues on the Samsung S10. Eric says, battery life on the plain Jane 11 is pretty good. I ended up getting converted. We got any other converts out there? I'm curious. And have you guys witnessed any? Anybody in your inner family circle who have suddenly jumped the Apple shark?
Or jump to Apple.
Jump to the Apple.
So jump to, well,
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. It's a good callback to how we started the show to talk about battery life, because battery life is a pretty unsexy concept
Yeah.
that tech reporters and tech reviewers are constantly harping on, saying that this is really something important. People use their phones like, constantly, almost like obsessively. And so battery life is this really important element. So the fact that Apple actually provided that with the iPhone 11, it's, to me, it seems like a somewhat unseen benefit to this whole thing, and it's great that you called it out, because it's not something that I immediately thought about, because they don't. That's not something that they highlight in any of their promotions, really, or well, not
That's
that much
interesting.
anyway.
I mean, I feel like they keep calling it out in ways, but then you're right. Maybe not in like in ads so much. But also, like, to be clear too, it's interesting. Like the 11 only gained like an hour over the 10R. So like the 10R last year was a great battery life story. So I already felt like that was like the leap, and that was why I felt like it was like a standout. This year, the Pro models did even better than the 11 by a couple hours. So they've all reached a level where they're now good. In my mind, they're good. Like I don't go over the top and feel like they're like astounding, but they're not a problem.
Not like
anymore.
a smartwatch, right? There are
Right.
certain smartwatches that you don't have to plug back in.
You could do
after
like
a couple days,
not
or
the
a
Apple
week,
Watch,
or whatever.
but like others, yeah.
Right, and
where
we're
you
not
could do-
there yet. Maybe we will be one day for smartphones, but at
Like
this point,
2 days would be really cool, or to be able to like eke out 2 days, or to have more power control over that, or. I still feel like by the end of the day, I top it off out of nervousness, but it is something.
same
a
here.
little bit is my own
well,
nervousness.
I have
Like, it's
I have
not,
a
do I really
Galaxy.
need to do that?
I have a Galaxy S10 that's about 2.5 years old at this point, and
Yeah.
you definitely. I feel like you have to top it off kind of in the late afternoon. The battery's getting a little bit old. The battery life was better earlier on. So yeah, it's definitely a big value to get good battery life. And I think the expectation had been set that you just don't want it to die by the end of the day. So
Yeah.
if they've gotten much better with that, where
Yeah.
it's got enough by the time you're going to bed, then obviously that's making customers happy.
The Apple Watch is the next one that I'd like to see get the battery life boost, and I feel like that's been overdue. Maybe that's what we'll see this year, but the reason to me is clearly a stepping stone to sleep tracking and things like that, but also just for like ease of use. Fitbit and others, there are others that go not the smartest smartwatches like the Samsung and others, but there are other watches out there that go 4 or 5 days or more.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a mode that gets there.
All right, 5 minutes left, rapid fire. Let's see how many we can get to. Timothy wants to know if 2020 is going to be the year of Siri. Is Apple finally going to make Siri worth your while?
That's a good question.
Is this year the year of Siri? I feel like that we've said that many times.
Yeah,
Not
there
in
are
particular.
there are slow incremental improvements. I
Yeah.
think the human reviewer thing might actually cause Siri to take a step back. Basically, Apple had decided to have a pretty stringent opt-in clause where you have to opt in to have human reviewers then review some of your recordings, if they even review any of yours. They review a very small fraction of recordings to make sure that the AI is actually processing the information correctly, that it understands, accents, or, maybe it doesn't mishear something, whatever. If they have less people submitting for that, then the AI doesn't get as good. So even though it is a privacy benefit to the fact of like Siri actually being useful, it might actually make things harder. So what that means is that making Siri be able to do more stuff and be more of like a, Swiss Army knife, it might make it more complicated by the fact that they're not doing as much in the back end to be able to have it understand you in a variety of ways, whether it's in a loud environment or what have you.
That's interesting.
Next up, let's take one from our old friend Michael Brown. He says, I listened to the earnings call, and one reporter asked a great question. It revealed that the majority of Apple's earnings comes largely from its current customers, not new customers. Do you think this is why its stock price is skyrocketing? Apple has proven that their customers will pay anything to have the Apple product, no matter if the margins are amazing for Apple.
I think in previous years, and great question, by the way, Michael.
Yeah.
I think in previous years, Tim Cook has absolutely, during earnings calls, talked about the fact that they want to broaden their base. They always want new customers, but it's obviously a very good point to say that they have an extremely loyal base. Yeah. And they tested that base for several years where they kept trying to raise the price of the iPhone. And I think that they finally realized that they had to restrain themselves. Anyway, I'd love to hear your points on this too.
Yeah, I think that that's a great point. And I think this is exactly what Apple is doing. And I think that they've been exploring this for a while, and now they're really pushing full forward in a lot of different directions with that. Part of it is the accessory element, starting with watch, then AirPods.
Get you to keep buying stuff.
Yeah, significant amount of hardware in addition to the phone. It's like a second phone purchase. And then now the subscriptions, which is like, going to push the element of, I wrote last year about subscription fatigue. Like, well, I've hit it in a lot of ways. People are going to only have so many things that they're going to pick. And I can see some of the free trial attempts trying to mitigate that for people, so that maybe you got Disney Plus free for a year, or you got your Apple TV Plus. You don't have to think about it right now, but eventually you have to pick who stays on the island for subscriptions. But so I don't think it's clearly not an infinite level that people will pay, and so everyone's going to hit that wall. But Apple is pushing that. I think
they're doing it. Yeah, broadly speaking, they're doing a good job building out that ecosystem, as you said. Yeah.
It's a smarter approach than like the premium product territory, which I feel like they backed off on, both from the pushing the premium focus of previous iPhones and the language they used, or even things like the edition watches that were like, they still make those. I mean, they have titanium now. They have things like the ceramic, but I just feel like, that's not the answer, but like providing useful things that might tempt people. Then you got the AR and the glasses thing like looming someday down the road.
And 5G potentially at the end of the year. Anyway, let's get to more questions.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about those contact lenses. As glasses wearers, I know you weren't really able to put them into your eyes, Scott, because they're still conceptual, they're not approved. But you got to glance through them. What do you think the performance is as a lens? What are you going to need to see for that to be a comfortable thing to include as part of your repertoire?
I mean, there's so many unknowns here. One thing that's interesting just to note is that like I'm severely myopic, but like if I hold the lens up to my eye, I could read the text clearly. So that's something that like they could deliver that regardless of what your prescription was. And they're intending on making prescription lenses that they need to. So they're going to they have optometrists at their company, some of which have worked on launching multiple contact lenses before this. So it sounds like they're on a path for that, but I have a million questions that I'm skeptical about, long-term use. Also, your eye is so sensitive. Like,
how are you going to fit a battery on on your eyeball?
Like the tiniest irritation on your eye will cause your eye to freak out. A little speck of dust or an eyelash. So like if the design of the lens is not 100% perfect, it's going to be incredibly uncomfortable. Then again, contact lenses have been able to be made as a product. That's another thing you think, well, how would I deal with the lens in my eye? That seems like it would be annoying, and contact lenses exist. So
you're making a good point in that contact lenses are very thin plastic, as opposed to adding additional hardware.
This was a hard domed lens, and I don't know if that's what the final form will be like, but and I didn't get a chance to put it in my eye. So I think there's a lot of questions that somebody else, a reader had said to me, or someone had said to me something like, I think it was on the radio, that like, why would I pick that over over glasses, or like it would always be on if I'm closing my eyes. And I'm like, yeah, that's another really interesting question. Like, I mean, the always be on if you're closing your eyes, who is that really for? If you have vision impairment, why would you pick this over glasses that would improve them? That might be less annoying. But I think it's interesting that they're exploring this for correcting vision for a lot of people. So we have to see how that plays out. There may be other ways this product evolves. You can't really see where it's heading at this point, so to speak. But
sounds promising. But yeah, I agree with you that there are more questions than answers about it.
And it's AR. You know, anytime you say AR is like can mean a lot of different things. Here, I think of it as overlaying information that you can read as a heads-up display. But it's not. You know, this is not like dinosaurs on your breakfast table. You know, we're not.
Yeah. Why?
It's not 3D, right? And why would you even need that? So.
Just take acid if you want to do that.
Just do that.
CNET does not condone the actions and suggestions of Ben Fox Rubin.
Just get a Magic Leap, get a HoloLens, and let the other substance things, you know, sit on the side.
I have a severe phobia of touching my eye. Anything going near my eye. It's honestly the only thing that makes me turn away during movie scenes. I can handle any kind of gore, but if it has the eye, I lose my mind. So Brian is also asking, is like, I wouldn't want to put electronics in my eye unless they can guarantee the power source doesn't explode or doesn't leak or unsafe chemicals. And like in the past, if you've got a damaged contact lens and you put that in, you get a scratch on a cornea. That's bad enough. That thing blows up. What the hell?
Yeah, I'm terrified.
What are they promising in their trajectory as far as safety standards?
All total unknowns. And so like.
But they do need to get it as approved as a medical device. So this has to go through the FDA.
Yeah, so as they're pointing out, any contact lens in the U.S. would have to be an FDA-approved device. So they're on a path for that regardless. But is that even enough to know the long-term, you know, questions of how this product performs? You have multiple questions going on here at the same time, and they are unknowns. I felt like this is the closest spiritually that we've ever come to the idea of an implant, because I agree, like the eye is such a sensitive area. The idea of putting it on my eye felt not much different than the idea of putting in an implant, and that's an unsettling thought. Like I don't want to put anything. I don't want to get LASIK. The same thing. Like I'm worried about doing things to my eyes. So it's a great question. I mean, again, as a demo, I found it incredibly fascinating. We're not at the point of evaluating how the rest of this will shape out, but there's a lot more questions with it.
For sure. I don't know. It's a really badass idea on paper, but I would be way too nervous to even go near this. But I don't know. The idea of having like a Master Chief Halo Cortana pop-up heads-up display is kind of neat. I wonder what their goal for implementation. Like you saw the demo had all the street signs. And for those tuning in late, we're talking about the Mojo lens, this contact lens that can convey information straight into your eyeball. Not a real thing yet, just kind of like testing the waters here. I don't know. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. It'd be really awesome to have that kind of information available at me at all times. I'm kind of like swimming in that idea right now.
Well, the other interesting thing is like maybe it's not a contact lens, but it just shows how small the components are getting for these things, that we're going to start seeing computer vision and these types of displays combined to create really tiny, fascinating aids. I held it up to my eye. I didn't put it in my eye, and it worked. So again, like maybe it's something that you wear as glasses, or maybe it's some other little thing that's even smaller than glasses that's not in your eye for some people. So I think it's like even going beyond the lens, it's like how are people thinking about this and how crazily microscopic some of it can be. Like I was shocked at the size of the micro LED display, which by the way kind of looked like a Game Boy. It wasn't like you could see the pixels on it, but it was readable.
Yeah,
it's almost like if you take a New Jersey Transit or like a train and you see the station announcement and it's like green lettering on those old boards. It's like lit up and it forms like the words. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Like a ticker.
Yeah, like the ticker, or like on the train when it has the thing and it's like, yeah, it's like it's kind of pixely. It was kind of like that, but very readable. So it just to create an understanding that this is not, because this display is. Lexi at CNET had also written a separate story looking at it. You can see what the display looks like, how incredibly small it is. This is like microscopic. And eventually they want to get to monochromatic and 3D. I mean, multicolor and 3D. Like you wear 2 of these and then start seeing depth. So
That was my thought, is next up, Google's going to try this, and they're going to put their AR maps kind of stuff in there. And then I had a horrifying thought that I'm going to leave you all with, because we do have to wrap it up. We're way over time. Before we go, here's your terrifying future fear of the day. Somebody hacked your contact lenses and starts putting weird AR 3D stuff into your line of sight.
Right. So that's directly from Snow Crash.
yeah.
So, and I think that was an implant. Those are eyeball implants that, would get hacked, and like from the novel, people would just blow their brains out. That's what
I forgot
that's what
about
the
that.
author referenced. Yeah. It was just like the only way to fix the problem was to kill
Yeah, so
yourself.
don't go down that path. That would be a terrible technology decision for any company. But the whole, almost all the big companies we know of are working on technologies of AR and spatial computing. So there's a lot of weird stuff being researched right now, I'm sure.
Sure is. All right, last thing before we do shut things down. We put a poll up yesterday on Twitter as a follow-up to our conversation with David Katzmeyer about TVs and Super Bowls. Just curious about what people thought were their most important features when buying television. 52.6% came in with picture quality. That makes the most sense. Obviously, people love to have the biggest, brightest picture at 4K and up. Next in line, 25% said price. Of course, that's going to be a mitigating factor for everybody. Longevity and brand loyalty. And Twitter only gives you 4 options as far as polls go, so take this with a grain of salt. I just thought it'd be interesting to kind of keep that going and see what we could rally behind it. For me, it was longevity. I don't buy anything new until my prior device is belching fire, which is actually how I woke up this morning. My air purifier in my bedroom just blew up, so yeah, that was a great way to start my day. But thanks, everybody. That was a really fun show, great conversation. We'll be back again tomorrow. Scott, thank you for joining us. Sally, thank you for joining us. And Ben, take us on home.
Yeah, for new viewers out there, we're live weekday mornings, and we're always hoping to grow our audience and learn more about what you want to learn about. So if you are picking up what we're putting down, please subscribe and ring the bell and join us at each and every show. We're also available on the go. Links to the audio podcast are in the description below. For The Daily Charge, I'm Ben Fox Rubin.
And I'm Scott Stein.
Thanks for joining us.